Hi guys, how you doing? And welcome to this week's video, Freakin Friday. And today I'm very lucky to have Stephen Lane, who is the owner and master of the Propstore of London. Now, if you don't know much about this, the Dark Lord indeed. First of all, thanks for having us here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for coming out today, Brian. It's good to see you guys here.
And it is really nice. I've got to say, this is like my Hamleys for adults. Just wandering around, it's absolutely amazing. Okay, so a lot of people that I talk to on my channel and subscribers, they ask me, like, how do you get into stuff and how can I get hold of this? And, can I get hold of movie props from movies and stuff? And obviously, the best person to come to is yourself. So I thought today we'd talk about how you got into it, what got you into it, and where the company's going, and what great and exciting stuff you've got happening in the future. So let's basically start off with the first thing, was how did you get into this?
It's an element of your passion and your enthusiasm for whatever it is that you do, sort of transferring into something that becomes your livelihood. And I've been very, very lucky. I started collecting Star Wars toys and action figures and things like that when I was very young. And before that, I had the Topps trading cards in the school playground when I was 7 years old, like everybody else did. And so I was always a collector, an avid collector of things. Went away, forgot about collecting, came back sort of 19, 20 years old, got my first job, earning a bit of money, and then it's just like, car boot sales. Oh, look, the old action figures. You start collecting them again. And I think a lot of it was the nostalgia value at that point. You're sort of revisiting something that was very important during your childhood. And that was the draw in for me. It was sort of the movie-related action figures, the toys. That then progressed into a collection of toys and sort of, Star Trek dolls. And
Well, hold on. Here, what was your right? Okay, so like me, I used to collect my Star Wars figures when I was younger, and also when I got older.
Sure.
But what was the one model or one toy that made you very, very happy to own?
Oh, well, I think if we go back to that period, and this is the second time round when I had a bit more money.
Disposable cash.
Yeah, that's right. The disposable income, and it was okay. Where are those really rare American release toys that we never got in the UK that you always saw in the catalogues? You're like, seriously, man, where do I get that sonic controlled land speeder from? You can't get it. And so I think without a shadow of a doubt, it would be the remote controlled Jawa Sandcrawler, which I still own one today, or I went back out and bought it and I kept it and I still have it. So, it was that really sort of rare, aspirational toy, if you like, that was from that era, which I could just never get hold of.
For me, it was the cardboard Death Star.
Yeah, very cool.
When I got that, I think my parents managed to find it for me in the end. They bought it from someone that had it, who had been to the States and got it, and I was like, my life is complete. Okay, so from toys, it's a big step from collecting props.
Yeah. Well, as I started to say, this is about your passion. For a lot of people, when you're moving through life, wondering what it is that you're going to do with yourself. The people who are generally the happiest and most successful are not people who have sat there and necessarily strategized about, I want to be this and I want to be that. And of course that does work for some people. But for a lot of other folk, it's more about an organic process because if you are passionate and enthusiastic about things, when you're talking to people about it, when you're interacting with other people, that comes across and other people will engage with you. And that's what it was all about. I was passionate about Star Wars. I was passionate about collecting. I took that to the next level when I started going to the toy fairs. We did them together at the memorabilia at the NEC many years ago, where you dressed up in many different costumes.
Hold on. Shush. No one knows about this.
Oh, yeah. No. Just email me, stephen@propstore.com. I've got the photos. And I spent years doing that, and it was at those shows we first started seeing film props come around. And film props were never that sort of material that you could just go and buy off the shelf. There was nowhere, no store, no website back then, of course. And it was really a question of they were filtering into the toy collecting community just on the sort of peripheral of it. Guys who worked in the film industry were also passionate about films and toys and things, so they would come to those shows and sometimes bring those things along. And it was at a show in Westminster in about the very early 90s in London where a guy came in with a Star Wars Rebel blaster. I'd owned small props and bits and pieces before then in the tens of pounds, but this guy wanted £500 for it. And I was just entranced by it. I was just, oh, this is it. This is the big step. Not only, no longer collecting something that's connected to, just a representation of what was in the film, but actually something that was filmed on. And he had a great story behind it. He was a guy who had worked in press and marketing for one of the poster magazines that came out. It was the famous poster that had Darth Vader flanked by 2 Stormtroopers with a sort of silver mylar background to it. And initially they sent down the wrong guns for that photo shoot because nobody really knew what the guns were. Once Lucas had gone back to America and it was left to the press guys in the UK, and they'd sent down these Rebel blasters instead of Stormtrooper blasters.
Isn't there a famous photograph with them holding the Stormtroopers holding Rebel blasters?
They definitely hold the wrong guns in different shoots. This specific one, they still end up with a couple of very random guns. One which was cut down that we've seen actually float to the market since then as well. So he had a great story. He worked on that. They had the wrong guns. He kept them. They never called them back. He used it for fancy dress, stuck diodes and electrodes all over it to make it look more sci-fi over the years. And I committed to it, and it was £500, and it was a big step at that point from action figures to a Rebel blaster. And so once I got that and I'd committed that sort of spend to it, I was, where do I go from here? What's the next step for that? Okay, well, who made it? Where was it made? How does it end up with this guy? Where is other stuff like this? And I went to see Bapty and Company when they used to be on the old Harrow Road site. And that was the original facility that they'd worked on Star Wars from. And I went to see a lovely guy there called Richard Hooper, who actually worked on the film as well. And I sort of had it wrapped up in sort of plastic bags and tissue and stuff like that. And he agreed to see me, to sort of have a look at it and maybe authenticate it for me. And I unveiled it for him very sort of nervously. And he's like, oh yeah, no, this is definitely one of ours. I remember how he used to catch the back of my hand here, and construction looks right. And he agreed to do some restoration on it. And so that was a very big step for me. And he said, look, do you want a tour of the place while you're here? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to have a look around. Not really knowing or understanding what it was that his company did at that time at all. I didn't know what an armour is well. And he took me around, and there's all this other stuff, from Flash Gordon and Aliens and Batman and these Swords and Sandals epics and sci-fi film stuff. And I said to him, well, what happens to this stuff? And he said, well, we'll either repurpose it, so repaint it, strip it back, refinish it, redress it, or he said if it doesn't rent after a while, we throw it away. And I was just like, throw it away? What are you talking about? And that was the start. At that point, I was like, okay, well, if these guys have that, and nobody really cares about this stuff once a film wrapped, which at that time they really didn't, it was deemed very much just a byproduct of the filmmaking process. The product is in the can. It's all about the movie. The rest of it's rented in or just disposed of, sold back to rental companies afterwards. And I was like, well, if that's what happens, then what else is buried out there?
Well, because a lot of amazing pieces have just found their way into skips, haven't they? I mean, you're talking about back in the days where, like you're saying, they weren't really important to the merchandising or to the marketing value of it. They just got binned.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some famous shots of the space station wheel from 2001 being on top of a dump. And that was basically where Kubrick and MGM, between them, neither of them wanted to pay for the storage for all of the props and costumes and model miniatures from that film. And they were, like you see today, in storage wars or something like that. They didn't pay the bill. Guess what? They emptied the storage facility out and dumped the lot. And that was the mentality then. Why would we pay for storing this stuff? Kubrick's probably, I'm never going to do a sequel of this, even though obviously we saw a sequel directed by somebody else. But at that point, it's about the overhead. It's about the cost. The film's done. We've locked the film. It's in the can. That's it. We don't need anything else again. And Kubrick's saying to MGM, come on, carry on paying for this stuff. They're like, no, you pay for it if you want to keep it. And neither of them pay for it, and they throw it away. And we've heard countless tales, similar tales over the years of many, many artefacts, really key popular culture artefacts that should be preserved and in a museum today, but no longer exist for that very reason.
Do you see, this is quite interesting, but do you see these as museum pieces? Do you see these as, stuff that should be claimed as heritage as well? Because at the end of the day, these are films that have influenced generations of children or adults that have pushed them into collecting, and because one of the things that we do, obviously, is that we look for reference out there when we're making models on the show and stuff like that. We look for reference that's out there, like Indiana Jones, and try to replicate trucks and stuff from those movies in 28mm scale. So do you think these sort of items have got to the point where they are nostalgic pieces that should be kept into museums?
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. And we do work with a number of institutions and museums, both to rent material into them for exhibitions, to raise awareness of and which ultimately demonstrate the level of interest in this material as well. And we're great firm believers in that. And we work with a lot of archivists and archives for studios as well, helping them trying to locate material that they have gaps for, ultimately that they just didn't care about during that period. And so we'll go out and find something and try and position it back in with them so that we know that it's going to be preserved there for future generations. But as well as the museums and the institutions, private collectors are also incredibly important. There are numerous artefacts that are out there now in private hands that wouldn't exist today if those people hadn't cared about them at that time. And that wasn't museums and institutions being aware of it from very early on. They're catching on to it now because of all the press, the publicity, and also the value that's been attributed fiscally to some of this material as well. But it was the private collectors, the passionate individuals who cared enough to want to take that home with them and keep hold of it, take it out of the skip when it was down at the studio. They've thrown that thing away and saved it. And that you can't diminish the importance of those people and what they've done.
Do you think, though, it's movies like Star Wars, for example, that have really sort of kicked the sort of prop business of like collecting?
No, not necessarily. I think that Star Wars is one that's easy for us to focus on because I'm very passionate about it. This is my company, and you know what I'm all about. For any person in business, a lot of it's going to be about their motivation, their personal motivation and strategy, and therefore we've been channeled in that general direction. And the same with my COO, Brandon Allinger, who runs the Los Angeles facility.
Well, we've got to say that there's a London branch, and you've opened an LA branch as well.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. In 2007, Brandon opened that for us. And he's just written the book on the costumes of Star Wars from the original trilogy, so he's very Star Wars focused as well. But going back to your original question, there have been collectors who have been passionate about this material for a number of years before I was around, before I was collecting. Certainly generation above us. If you look at things like the Dorothy slippers from The Wizard of Oz, the big MGM sale that took place in LA in the 1970s, where you had Debbie Reynolds up against so many of the highbrow collectors of that time. So, we're going back 45 years there, and people were passionate and collecting about it. Star Wars has that crossover appeal. Star Wars is one of those films where everything is so identifiable that the world that George Lucas created, this dirty space, if you like, was so recognisable. Almost anything from that film is significant and can be treasured. And so that's certainly opened the eyes for a lot of people, because a lot of people love that movie and so will go looking for that stuff. But there are so many films of that era that we're all passionate about. You've got your Star Wars, your Batmans, your Indiana Jones, your Aliens, Superman films.
But these are all films that we've grown up with.
No, that's what I'm talking about. And that's what I was saying a moment ago. It's generational. There are different generations who are going to focus on different things. It hasn't been started by Star Wars. It won't end with Star Wars. The next generation, it might be the prequels of Star Wars. No, it could be.
Hold on. Are we talking about Phantom Menace? I don't know why I'm giggling.
I know why you're giggling, man. A little schoolgirl. It could be. I talk to kids who are older now, who grew up with the prequels, who grew up with some of the films that we shuddered at when we watched, because for us it was about that sort of late 70s, 80s, early 90s era. But it'll be the same for the generation before us. They were into The Wizard of Oz, and Gone with the Wind. They'll be like, really? Who cares about Star Wars? They don't. Some productions, material from certain productions are going to transcend through generations. So there is going to be a degree, a level of respect and understanding and appreciation, no matter what the film titles are. Take James Bond, if you go right the way back to Dr. No to where we're at today, we're talking a span of 2 generations, and it's going to continue. The same with Star Wars, with the new films that are being released now, and Batman, Star Trek as a franchise will continue through those generations and has a 2-generation sort of collector field base. So we would like to think that a lot of what we're handling today could be the Dorothy slippers for the years to come. People will go to museums in years to come, and of course Lucasfilm do a great job at the moment from their archive with touring and exhibiting the artefacts that they have. But there is no doubt that these are going to be significant pieces of history.
Because they're very precious about keeping everything safe and archiving everything, because from what photos I've seen and videos I've seen online, they are very clever about keeping hold of original pieces, but the odd piece gets out there. Now, how does that happen? Is it from people that have worked on the film that have been given the props, and obviously they've got to a point in their life now where they no longer need them, they're going to pass them on, or is it Lucasfilm's releasing stuff? Because obviously we've got a beautiful piece in front of us, and it's just, I've got to say, just sitting near it, I'm worried, and I'm literally I'm a foot away from it, and I just don't want to breathe near it. It's so beautiful. So how hard is it to acquire pieces like that?
Well, you've asked a few different questions there. Let's go back.
I want them all answered.
Okay, let's go back to Lucasfilm first of all. So this goes back to some of my earlier comments where I was saying that there was not the degree of understanding, respect and care applied to production assets that there is today back during that era. So Star Wars, the first film, A New Hope, as everybody knows, was a reasonably low budget film. Even though there was a lot of money spent on it at the time, it was made in the UK. A lot of material was rented into the production. A lot of the material was sold off at the end of production. A lot of it was scrapped. Some of it, was given away to producers and heads of departments, again, because there was no real value attached to these at that time. Similarly for Empire Strikes Back, by the time it got to Return of the Jedi, there was more of an understanding that these were, they had levels of interest in their own right. That famous shot of George Lucas standing on the soundstage with all of those model miniatures and props around it. You look at that, and that's got to be a trigger for somebody thinking, hang on a second, this is a museum grade exhibit just sitting here right now. This is archival material. And so the philosophies started to change, but the material that's out there today from those early films just got out because it got out. It wasn't necessarily that people were lifting off set. It was more a question of, there's no value to this. It's done. We're done with it. There was stuff in storage still at Elstree Studios in 1989 from those Star Wars films that just nobody cared about. And in the end, they just got stripped out, and again, some of it got thrown away. So why is it out there? All of those reasons. Similar to the story that I told you about Bapti. You go to a rental house, and we were still finding stuff in rental houses from the Star Wars films up to the last few years. Less of it now. We've tried to turn all those rocks and stones over, but you never really know where it's going to come from next, and how it ended up there. And that's a lot of the fun of what we do. Stormtrooper helmet.
Now, I've got to say, this is such a beautiful piece, and this is an original piece as well. So would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the really key feature lots that's coming up for our live auction that's taking place on September the 23rd at the BFI IMAX at Waterloo, together with Odeon. We have over 450 lots, props, costumes, artwork from over 150 film and television shows. It's going to be a phenomenal auction. It's a live auction that's taking place on September the 23rd, but you can also bid online and register at propstore.com/live auction. You'll be able to watch and stream the video footage throughout the course of the live auction during the day. Bidding is actually open right now. You can register. There's already bids on board. There's actually a £20,000 bid already on this, an absentee bid already on this. So the fun has already started.
Oh my God! I've got to say, I can understand why people. I can understand why people buy props. I can understand why they collect movie pieces that they really love. For me, growing up as a kid, it was the George Lucas, Steven Spielberg movies that really sort of pushed me to want to do what I wanted to do. And as a kid, I think if you owned like just a plastic Stormtrooper helmet, you were like the god.
It was a big deal. Yeah, and this is one of those things. This is one of those pieces that you can walk into a room in anybody's house and 99.9% of people are going to know exactly what it is immediately, whether you've seen the films or you haven't. This is one of those truly iconic images that it was everywhere, has been everywhere, and will continue to be seen for generations to come. This particular trooper helmet is from Empire Strikes Back. It's what we call a Mark II helmet. So you have the first film helmets that were built for A New Hope, which were made of a very different material to this. They were actually made of a pond liner material, of all things, because they really struggled with the vac forming machine at that time to get all the undercuts. So they went to a boat manufacturer, and he managed to come up with a way of forming the shapes using this pond liner. I mean, we're talking like fish pond liner here, which is a grey material. They made the shapes for the first film, then realised that you can't paint it. Paint doesn't stick to it. So they sprayed it with like a red oxide primer, and then they painted it with household white paint. Literally, gloss paint, brushed it on. Go and watch the Blu-ray, freeze frame any close-ups on any of the Stormtroopers from that, and you'll see the runs in the paint. It's phenomenal that they ever got onto set.
Because I've got to say, people never really understand this, that stuff on film sets isn't always as perfect as they think it is. They'll have hero pieces, which are the close-up pieces, but then stuff that's never really sort of in prop sets, for example, like stunt lightsabers, stunt blasters and stuff like that. They're normally made as something completely different and not as well made as the hero props.
Sure, yeah.
But I can't believe they got a paintbrush to it and painted it with gloss paint.
Well, I think it was one of those situations where they just ended up with no time to try and rework it again and go elsewhere. The helmets were made, they were done, they were on set. And bear in mind, at that point in time, who envisaged Blu-ray? You know, we were going to go and see the film at the cinema. We might then see it for the re-release. You might see it as a double bill and a triple bill, which we did with Empire and Jedi. And then you might see it once a year on the BBC TV Christmas special or something like that. I mean, that's the way it rolls.
Or if you're unlucky on Betamax like me.
Sure, but even on Betamax, if you freeze frame to look at that Stormtrooper helmet, it'll just go... You know, and you get no detail. Kids today would have no appreciation or understanding of that whatsoever. And so during this era, sure, there was perhaps not the same degree of focus on attention to detail on how the end prop was going to look. And the same can be said of the Darth Vader helmet from A New Hope as well. If you look at the paintwork on that, again, freeze frame on some of the shots of that, it's pretty hokey. But it works. It works.
Right now, you're ruining a lot of my childhood memories.
But it was also part of George Lucas's philosophy. He wanted it to be dirty space. He didn't want it to be pristine, and we all know that worked. So, you know, I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking it. I'm just explaining. If you look at films today, if you look at the props and costumes that are created for films today, phenomenal. Just the workmanship, the craftsmanship, the skill sets that are used to build some of these pieces that might only be seen on film for a few seconds. Staggering.
Do you think it has completely changed to how it used to be? I mean, do you think there's more of a people now focus more on, or the creators now focus more on the costumes and the props and stuff because they know there's a resale value to them, or that it's just that we've got to a point where cameras are so good at picking up detail and technology is so much better that you really have to put a bit more effort into the design of the costumes and the materials?
I still don't think today that it's about the monetization, or there's not a focus during the production period about the monetization and capitalizing on the physical assets for resale. That is a process that comes afterwards still today. You know, we work with a lot of production companies and distributors to help strategize with them, working with those assets as part of a marketing campaign or to regenerate revenue, which for independent production companies, that's a big deal. You know, if you can get 6 figures back on assets that otherwise might have been thrown away, happy days. You know, that's a lot of bums on seats in the cinema by comparison. So that part of it isn't the reasoning behind it. It is all about the viewer experience. It is about the fandom that is around these films today that dissect each frame of footage. And prop masters and costume designers, the draftsmen, right the way through to the producers and the directors are very, very aware of that. The studios are as well. And they want the end product to look the very best that they can on film. And so that means that you need to spend a bit more time on the build at the outset. And that's the driving force for that. There's no doubt about that. And some of the stuff that we see today is just staggering. The electronics that goes into some of these things, the functionality. Even with the advent of green screen, we're still seeing phenomenal costume and prop pieces being built, which, you know, we're very happy about. Otherwise, what is there for us to work with in a few years' time?
So I've got to say, whenever I see a movie, I always sit back and I'm just like in awe. of different pieces that I see. I mean, obviously the Marvel movies that come out, the costumes are getting more and more exciting as they go along. For the new Star Wars movie, I'm very excited about the new Stormtrooper outfits. I love those, so I can't wait to see those when they come out, and the replica helmets come out as well, because I'll be buying one. But let's talk about this Stormtrooper helmet. Tell us everything about it, because it's, like you said, it's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, so as I was saying previously, this is a Mark II helmet. So this was made specifically for Empire Strikes Back. The concept at one point was that everything was going to be used, or a number of the things, once they got to Empire Strikes Back, they were going to try and repurpose for Empire. And when you watch Empire, predominantly you're looking at A New Hope, slightly tweaked A New Hope costumes. John Mollo, the costume designer, midway through production realised that they were going to be short, and they really just weren't going to have enough that were holding up. And so, looking through his notes, which we've done, and he still has his journals from the time with all of his sketches and designs, he ordered in enough material to make about another 10 to 12 Stormtrooper costumes. They're made of a completely different material. They're made of what's called a hair cell, or we call a hair cell plastic, and that's because inside the helmet, I'm just going to see if I can very carefully lift this off here. There we go. On the inside of the helmet, and it'll be very difficult for the camera to pick up, maybe we can have a closer look at this later on, is actually a very fine texture to it, which we call a hair cell. So this is instantly identifiable as being a vac form plastic rather than pond liner, hair cell plastic. It's not painted. So this is the white colour. As you can see over the years, it has oxidised, it has yellowed somewhat. And then you have the decals and some hand painting detail that's on there as well. And so this is very specific to Empire Strikes Back. Once they went to Jedi, they rebuilt everything again. So at that point, you're not seeing this version of the helmet or the A New Hope troopers on screen. You're seeing the Jedi model.
I've got to say, I feel like a little schoolgirl right now. I don't feel like one, but I personally feel like one right now. Sitting next to this, I don't know what to say or do.
What a piece of movie history. I mean, it's just such an emotive item. That takes you straight back to your childhood if you're certainly our age, around our age.
Yeah.
Or
22.
Yeah. or even kids now growing up with it. You know, this is an original Stormtrooper helmet. And that is what it's all about. It's the passion and excitement that ignites inside you. And we have a number of Star Wars items in the upcoming auction. This is probably one of the lead pieces. But if you're a fan of Star Wars, if you want to just come up and check out the auction, we've actually got a free-to-enter museum-grade preview exhibition at the BFI IMAX at Waterloo. That runs from September the 9th to September the 23rd. We're open every day from about 9:30 in the morning till about 9:30 at night. And we'll have Propstore specialists on hand. This will be on display there as well, along with a lot of the other Star Wars artefacts and about 250 other props and costumes as well.
So, go on, you're going to say something just because you're a giggling fool, Brian. Okay. Okay, so if you were to... I've got to ask this question, because I always ask these questions to people that specialise in their field. If there's one prop in this world, one prop that you would love to own, what would that prop be?
It's going to be back to Star Wars again, I'm afraid, and it's actually a costume, and that's Darth Vader's costume from A New Hope. And there was only one full costume made for A New Hope. It was obviously present for all of the filming. After filming, it went out on touring duties. So yes, if you were at some local supermarket and Darth Vader did an appearance around the time of A New Hope...
Was that the original costume?
There is a possibility that it could have been the original. They did actually make some repeat costumes, but the original costume was touring. And after that, it went, and nobody knows where it ended up. And at the moment, it is out there. And so, for me, that is interesting on many levels. You know, there is the whole mystery of why it isn't known, found in somebody's museum collection in the Lucasfilm archive, and does it still exist today? And plus, there was only one made, and Darth Vader's costume from A New Hope. Man, I don't know. It's going to be a tough one to beat.
I've got to say, because I remember Darth Vader and two Stormtroopers coming to my local toy store, Gamley's, when I was a kid, and we had to line up outside to wait to get in, and you had to buy a ticket, and you could go and have your photograph taken with him. I've still got that photograph. Now I'm hoping that one day that they do find it, and that was the original Darth Vader, not just a copy.
Yeah, very much depend on the era, because it really depends on whether you're talking about Empire era or Jedi era.
I'm talking Star Wars. like
Sure?
New Hope, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because I remember. Look, I'm like 40 now, and when I was a kid, it was when Star Wars came out. So
I definitely met I met Darth Vader in my local toy store.
he got everywhere.
He did. He got around. Dirty old stop out. And that was for Jedi. That was
Yeah.
I've got a photo of that as well.
Oh wow.
So I don't remember.
Yeah, no, I remember it being before Jedi because I remember we had to line up in a outside the cinema to see Jedi, and we were very excited. We ran out of school to go and see it very early, and all lined up. But okay, so that would be your most amazing. That would be the prop that you really want to own.
I think it's going to be right up there. That said, and hand on heart, a lot of times I get asked what my favourite film is, and obviously Star Wars is going to be up there along with a number of other classic films from my generation, from my period. But when I go and see a new movie that I love, that's my favourite film for that moment in time. Just having that experience is breathtaking, and it's so difficult to repeat until you see the next film that delivers above and beyond your expectations. And there is a degree of that with collecting film props and doing what I do. I love the hunt. I love the chase. I love the unknown and what might be coming. There's nothing better than getting a whisper or a rumour on something and trying to pursue that and chase people down who are connected or might have been connected to that production or to that artefact. And so the chase is a big part of it as well. Owning it is fantastic. I love it. I have a high regard and degree of respect for this material because of my passion and my love for filmmaking. But I also love the search.
And also, you just don't collect it. You've done a bit of restoration on stuff as well, because from what I remember, you did the Nostromo, restored that. And how's that doing now at the moment?
It's doing fine, thanks very much. I believe that's located out in LA. So the Nostromo, it was about an 18 months to 2 year rebuild project, which took place in Los Angeles. Even though it was originally built here in the UK, when we found it had been parked on a drive in California under a tarp some of the time for nearly 20 years. It was then taken in by Greg Nicotero from KMBFX out in the States, who had planned to restore it at some point, but just he's a busy guy, he's king of the Walking Dead these days, and he decided that it was something that he probably couldn't undertake, and that we were very excited about it, and we took it on board. And so we went back to Grant McCune, who are actually one of the leading model makers in Los Angeles for many, many years. Grant did a lot of work on the Star Wars films, the Star Trek films, amongst many, many others. And they still had a bunch of guys there who knew all about the traditional methods of model making. We're talking about the Nostromo the majority was formed timber shell, and then sort of these, I can't remember the name of the material, maybe plasticoat, is it? Plasticoat sheeting or plastic sheeting that is then formed with heat over the top of it, piece by piece. And so that what happened over the years was that, of course, under the sunshine, these things just went whip and then popped off like a Christmas tree dropping needles. It was on Bob Burns' driveway. If you want to Google Bob Burns, he's been a collector for many, many years, has a phenomenal collection today. And so he knew that he needed to retain those bits. They ended up in a bucket. So when we got the Nostromo, he came around with his bucket of bits as well. And then Grant and his team spent, as I say, 18 months to 2 years restoring that for us piece by piece. And we've got a bunch of video on our YouTube channel about that as well. You should check that out. It's a fun one.
I'll put a link to that. Just quickly then, because I know you're a busy person, so just quickly, if people want to buy props, how do they go about it?
Well, obviously Propstore.com has become a huge resource for collectors. We have over 7,000 props and costumes listed for sale on our website right now. We're continually having online auctions for productions, things like Ender's Game for Judge Dredd. We just done one for Hannibal. We've got a Rick Baker online auction coming up. We've got a Fury online auction coming up. We've got a Dracula online auction coming up. That's all before the end of this year, after our live auction. We're very heavily entrenched with the prop and costume collecting communities, so check out our Facebook page. We have a lot of activity. We post articles on there and on our blog as well on our website, propstore.com. And there are a number of other forums and blogs to look out for as well, so Google around. And if you're thinking about starting to collecting, then it's all about research. It's all about reading those articles, looking at what's out there. Don't just trust what you find on eBay for 10 quid as actually being a real egg from Alien. There's this one miniature alien egg that's been turning up on eBay now for, 2 years, this black painted thing about this, and this guy professes that they're all original, and it's, he's taking people for a ride for 50 quid every time, and it's almost impossible to police. So watch what you're buying. Listen to what the provenance is. Is there a certificate of authenticity? If you buy from us, you get a certificate of authenticity that guarantees it as being exactly what it's stated to be, and that's a money-back guarantee. Make sure wherever else you're looking to buy, if you're considering somewhere else, that they have a similar sort of facility for you so that you're protected. Buy what you love. It's very easy to get caught up in the prospects of the appreciation of value over time with this material. We've seen values double, treble, quadruple, and many, many more multiples over the last 10 to 15 years, and they continue to appreciate in value. But it's important to think about what it is that interests you. I buy, as I say, out of majority of it's driven out of nostalgia value, because I want to revisit my youth. I went to the premiere of Star Wars with my dad in Leicester Square. He printed the Palatoy card backs for the action figures. If only he'd kept those. But it's the same for most collectors, and most collectors will go down that path anyway. But it is an important thing to think about. Why are you buying it? And then with film prop collecting and costume collecting, it's not cheap. A lot of things are very expensive. This Stormtrooper helmet is going up with an estimate of £40,000 to £60,000. That's not indicative of everything that's in the auction catalogue. We have items starting at £50. But when you're considering what you want to spend, what your budget's going to be, think about trying to buy the best piece you can for your budget rather than many smaller pieces within that budget. And the reason for that is if you are trying to sort of protect as an investment what it is you're buying into, the more valuable the piece is means the more significant it is, the more screen time it gets, the better film that it's from. And that's going to be the piece in years to come that other people and other collectors are going to be interested in. So it's good to think about from that perspective as well. But buy it because you want to have it. Buy it because you want to have it on display in your bedroom, in your cinema room, wherever it is, in your dining room, and enjoy it like you would art. And I think if you're buying from the heart, then you're going to love it. No matter what happens with regards to the value, you're going to get enjoyment out of it. You're going to have your mates around. You're going to watch the film. It's a freeze frame on that Blu-ray. no fuzzy screen, and say that's the one. Yeah. And that's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun about our hobby.
Yeah, I think there is a sense of ownership, isn't there, when you have something like this in your house, like when you see it on a film, there's quite a bit of pride, that you own that piece.
And direct connection to a film that you love. There's nothing more exciting than that. Yeah. But, remembering, and as I said earlier, how important private collectors have been building the sort of entire, just really saving these artefacts over the years. We are just custodians for a short time. No matter, we say we own it, you can't take it with you. So look after it. You're going to preserve it, you're going to hand it on to somebody else, and hopefully one day maybe that piece might end up in a museum.
That's absolutely fantastic. Well, Steve, I can't thank you enough for letting us round today. It's, again, I'm afraid to get near that. It's been absolutely amazing. And guys, if you get the chance, pop on over to their website, have a check, have a look at all the amazing stuff. And if you're in London, pop along to the exhibition and
BFI Max at Waterloo. Yeah, it's free to enter. It's all in glass cases. We'll have the Propstore experts up there as well to chat about film prop collecting there too. And they can see everything that we've talked about as well. Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, Steve, thanks very much. Guys, you be good. I was going to say that. You be good. You be safe. So you be good. You be good. You be safe. And I'm going to see you very, very soon. Take care.